Shireen, Bilqis, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having us.
You know, when we look at the upper echelons of sports in Canada, we find that Muslims are underrepresented. And I guess I want to start by looking within ourselves and our communities and ask, well, what are the possible reasons why Canadian Muslims might not actually be participating at the highest levels? So maybe I'll start with Shireen and ask you that first.
Thank you so much. That's such a great question. And I think the first thing we have to do is smash the assumption that there's no talent in our communities, because there is, alhamdulillah, across the board. I think one of the main things, and this is speaking about men and women, is that first of all, it can be a financial barrier, because rep sports and competitive sports can be very expensive. It can be a lack of understanding of time commitment and what that means, and them understanding that if children are put into extracurricular activities, they won't do well in school, which we know is not true. And thirdly, the barriers that are built within those systems, whether it's lack of uniform accommodation for Muslim girls and what they choose to wear, a lack of understanding of either in Ramadan or during prayer times. There's just a lack of information, and there's not exactly great communication happening between these two spaces. So those are some of the issues that we see.
So Bilqis, can you tell me about looking at Canadian Muslim women in particular, what sort of barriers might they face that might be a little bit different than the barriers that men face?
So it's an interesting question, because I just moved to Canada a little over a year ago.
Welcome to Canada.
Thank you. However, what I do see is the lack of opportunity, and that is in regard to just recreational sport. So growing up in America, there were always community centers that offered programs for girls. And I wouldn't say, when I was 12 or 13, they were there, but not as many. But I think in Canada, what I noticed, especially in the Muslim communities, are that there are only Friday night programs for boys, or Tuesday night karate classes for boys. And I think we just need to open up those doors for Muslim girls and to allow them to understand that there is a space for them. And once we do that and allow them to play, I think the whole, the misconception around Muslim girls playing sports will kind of disappear, and we'll see more at higher levels of play.
Do you think there's anything about, within the Muslim community, there's a lot of scrutiny if there's a Muslim athlete, what is she wearing and how is she moving her body and that sort of thing? Do you think that contributes to Muslim women being reluctant to participate in sports?
So I can really relate to that, because I've had comments made about what I've worn playing basketball, and really at the time there was no dry fit material or the sweat wicking material, that kind of made you feel free when you played. However, I've heard that, oh, you shouldn't be jumping around like that, or you shouldn't be dressing like that while you play. But the thing is, I think it's based on our intentions, and I think that's the beautiful thing about Islam. If somebody is blessed with a talent, why not use it? And when I stepped out on the court, I wasn't trying to get the attention of a boy or a man. It was because I love this sport, and I was going to wear what what was appropriate for me to wear at that time, and just play my game. And so it's, I know it's a fine line to cross. Some people don't, want their daughters to wear tights with shorts, or sweatpants without a really long shirt, and that's up to you. But I do believe that we need to base everything off our intentions, and that go from there.
Shireen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I could write a book about people's perceptions, which is ironic because I am, inshallah. Now, the issue of fixation on Muslim women's bodies, particularly in sport, we see within the community. And I say fixation because it's a dangerous way that people look at Muslim women, whether in sport and without. And the thing that I focus on is in sport. Now, the problem is we can make a choice as a community to support our talented young women, and our girls, and we can give them an opportunity to shine, and Hadaya comes, inshallah. What are we going to tell a 9-year-old who's talented that no? And now, mashallah, we've seen people come out with, and I say Nike came out with a swimsuit that's hijab wearing, but are we going to stop that child before that? No, we have to give them the choice to wear what they want and support them. There are so many girls that are Muslim identifying that may not necessarily wear hijab yet. But does that mean we're not going to give them our support? I don't think community support and amplification of our strengths goes like that. It doesn't work like that. And I'm telling you, you lose huge chunks of the community, and our girls and our women become isolated. When we fixate on hijab is only one way. We are not a monolith.
Thank you for sharing that thought, Shireen. That was very impassioned, but a really important point. Thank you. Bilqis, drawing on what Shireen has said, what advice would you give to somebody who feels like they're being policed or attacked because of what they're wearing, or let's say they're playing sports and they're moving in a certain way that people find, Muslim men in particular, might find offensive?
I guess my advice would be, the beautiful thing about Islam, again, is that it's between us and Allah. And I can't harp on more. I have to always speak about intention. And there is a lot of pressure. And what I would tell a young Muslim girl who may be practicing hijab or plans on doing so, you have to be strong. You have to be confident. And like Shireen mentioned, there's so much dawah that we give when we step out onto a playing field, whether it's soccer, whether it's volleyball, or it's basketball. I can't tell you how many times people have come up to me after a game, after staring at me and making jokes about me, but when they saw that I was good at basketball, they'd be like, man, can I ask why you have to wear that? Or are you hot in that? Or whatever the question is, I'm able to explain Islam with that question of hijab. And I think that's what we as women, as Muslim women, have to remember, is that we're the foundation of the faith. Like, we keep things going. And if you allow our girls to step out on these playing fields, there's so many opportunities that come from that. And one is to strengthen the confidence within. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shireen, I want to talk about sports culture a little bit and about the exclusion that exists within it. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you how we can convince people in positions of power, many of you whom are rich, white, and male, mm-hmm. how do we convince these individuals that some of the policies and practices that they have within their sports or association, organization, within the culture as a whole, mm-hmm.
is
excluding certain elements of the population?
Well, I want to be very clear that, we have a wonderful example of what campaigning and activism does. Bilqis and some other group of women also around the world were absolutely pivotal in changing FIBA's rule. But before basketball, it was also FIFA. That was a rule that impacted my life as a soccer player. Now, the thing is that the structures that you speak of—
And there's still some fields where, where people can't wear their
boxing, we're still
kinds of
fighting
clothing,
for.
Right?
Yeah, boxing we're still fighting for. There's certain aspects of FINA, which is the Swimming International Federation, the Volleyball FIVB. We're still fighting on many levels. So not every international federation has hijab or headwear bans. I just want to be clear about that, but many do. But all of them are headed by men. Now, those are the same people making the decisions about what women wear, and it's unacceptable. Also, strategizing, collaboration, the Muslim community came out when Bilqis and other basketball players needed them. They showed up. They signed the petitions, they wrote the letters, they amplified, whether it was stuff that I was writing or other journalists were writing about this. It takes a community to make this change. But the work starts on the back of these women, and we know it always has. And to make change at those levels, Bilqis can speak best to this, and you should really watch the documentary that talks about her life without basketball. It's now on Amazon Prime and available. All of you should download it. It's on Apple as well.
Every platform.
Every platform. You need to watch it to show the struggle that happens in order to make these changes. It doesn't come in a day, but it's coming, inshallah. In my 10 years of doing this work, it has come, inshallah, and it will come. But what it takes is support. It takes cooperation. It takes unification of our community to show that this is something that does need to change. Why are our women the ones that are left out? Why are we allowing this? We shouldn't, and it's as important. It's very important, inshallah. Our bodies are an amanat. We have to keep them fit.
Bilqis, I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for you to be an advocate for your own inclusion within sports. Tell me about that experience, how difficult it was, how painful.
Honestly, it was, I was kind of forced into the position. I don't believe that anybody should have to choose between their faith and their passion. And at the age of 22, 23, that's what I was forced to do. And there were many times where I was ready to take off my hijab to play because that was my dream since I was a child. And what really brought me back to my purpose was Islam, re-identifying with my Islamic identity through that struggle. And that's why I'm so appreciative for basketball. You know, there were many times where I was ready to just give up. I was doing videos, I was doing shows, I was doing articles, and plenty of times Shireen had interviewed me, and at one point I was like, what am I doing this for? And then I started speaking to young girls. Then I started putting on basketball camps and clinics for young Muslim girls. And when I saw them come out and make their first shot or do their first like real cool move, I'm like, that's what I'm doing it for. And so if I didn't stand up and ultimately use my voice, however I needed to use it to get FIBA out of the way, nobody else was going to do it for us. And I think that's what we're both speaking about. We do need the support from our Muslim brothers and sisters, especially our Muslim brothers, especially them, because they do get the opportunities that we don't get. And if we don't have their support, then what is this brotherhood? What is this sisterhood?
What advice would you give to an individual who's facing, an athlete who's facing exclusion and doesn't know what to do? Should they keep pushing as you did, pushing to push open that door? What should they do? Is there at a certain point, does it come at the expense of, let's say, your own well-being, right?
It absolutely will come at the expense of your own well-being because you have to make a choice. And I had to essentially give up my career, a professional career where probably would have made me some really good money, travel the world. But subhanAllah, that's what we know, is that this world is, you know, this fast. And that's what I had to let go of in order to open more doors. And to a girl or a Muslim girl that is facing adversity, you have to push. You have to speak up. You have to use your social media platform and use it for positivity, because I'm telling you now, especially in America, people don't know about Islam. People know what they see on TV and that's it. But when it comes to sports, sports unite. Sports bring people together. And you can place a ball in any country, no matter the language, no matter who's there, whatever that ball is, they're gonna know to pick it up, they're gonna know to pass to each other, they're gonna know how to shoot. It's beautiful. So if we can use something like sport to break down these barriers, there's really no better way to do it.
Can I add to that?
Sure, yes, sure.
I just wanted to add to, if there's anybody out there that is struggling with this, when I started writing about Muslim women in sports, so many people said to me, nobody cares. I'm telling you, subhanAllah, a lot of people care. I get invited all over the world, different post-secondary institutions. People absolutely care about these stories. What the Muslim community does within the community, within sports, absolutely matters. Don't let anybody tell you that your story or your struggle is not important. Alhamdulillah, you start with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you ask for his help, but people do care. Your story can be amplified. You can do it yourself on social media. There are journalists who cover this stuff. It absolutely matters. There's academics that study the sociological and cultural anthropological effects of it. Trust me. So don't feel like you're alone. You're really not.
Now, what purpose do you think, you know, there are some Muslim amateur leagues, right? Muslim professional, Muslim leagues in our community in Toronto, right? What purpose do you think, and some of them might be in the audience today, what purpose do you think that they could serve in terms of helping athletes develop and become more competitive? Do you think it's important to have these Muslim leagues?
I think there should be Muslims all across the spectrum. I've coached the Muslim Youth Soccer League, which started in Mississauga, was a place where when Muslim women weren't allowed to be in clubs at recreational or competitive levels, they were allowed there, and it created a space for them. That's where I played when I wasn't welcomed at OSC-sanctioned clubs. Now they absolutely do. It's a place where a woman's choice to wear what she wanted to wear hijab, she was absolutely permitted to do so. These things matter. It's also a place where they can get encouraged to then maybe be emboldened to go out into other spaces. There was a lot of girls I coached at a private Islamic school for almost 10 years, and when I saw kids, that these young girls, and I'll be very specific, I only coach girls, I can deal with the boys. I would tell their parents, your child is very good. I remember having a conversation with the father. I said, your daughter needs to be in a rep team. He was like, no, she's that good. I said, I'm telling you, and I have the ability to assess her. She needs to go. She's been playing there for 6 years, alhamdulillah. We don't think that our girls are capable, unfortunately. We just don't. They are more than capable, inshallah, if you give them the opportunities. And so Muslim spaces allow for this to happen. That being said, it comes with its own criticisms. There's sometimes, there'll be basketball for the boys in the masjid, and the girls will be an afterthought. Don't let them be an afterthought. We're not an afterthought. Because if you don't include girls in what they love in your community, they'll try to find it elsewhere. Don't we want to foster this in our communities and say that we helped plant the seed? Alhamdulillah, why wouldn't we want to?
Mm-hmm. A lot of people think of sports as entertainment, right? Can sports be a driver for social change? I mean, I noticed that a lot of people don't like to see athletes speaking out on political or social issues, right? They think, why don't you just go play, So what would be your response to that? Do you think athletes have a responsibility to speak out?
So it's really a double-edged sword, because like you said, as an athlete, sometimes you just want to play. You don't want to use your voice. You kind of want to stay in the background and, make things happen just on your playing field. However, nowadays you realize that we do have to speak up. And you look at players that I know immediately come to mind, like LeBron James, Steph Curry. People like them who actually, and one I mentioned Steph Curry because he's religious and he doesn't mind pointing up to the sky every time he shoots a three. You have LeBron James building schools for young African American boys and girls and giving them opportunities to reach in higher education. And so I do think it's important, if you have the voice and you have the will to make change, and it can take just a black and white ball to do it or orange ball to do it, then why not? Because it's fairly easy, and just to piggyback on your last, what Shireen just mentioned about opening up the doors. My husband and I were really brought to Canada to kind of create these spaces for sports in Muslim communities. And so I think that if we continue to have these programs, we need the community to support them. And that's one thing, because I know I've done multiple basketball clinics and camps for girls, and nobody shows up or brings their girls, but the girls want to come. So again, parents, you have to realize that your daughter does have the ability. And I remember just this one instant where I saw a parent see his daughter or her daughter the first time play. And I'm like, I told you your daughter was good. And they're amazed. Now they're like, I want her to play in this, I want her, so go out and support and watch your kids play. And I think that'll change the mindset in a lot of our communities.
We've seen a lot of talk within the hockey sphere about racism. What practical steps do you think need to be taken within sports culture to make it more safe, more inclusive, more diverse? Maybe we'll start with Shireen.
I'm going to talk hockey.
Hard topic?
First, she's American. She'll get the hockey soon, inshallah.
We can talk about basketball culture as well.
I think one of the things is when we think about hockey as a sport, which I'm very passionate about, to watch, hockey itself is not the problem. Sports is a beautiful connector. You can go anywhere in the world, Muslim majority countries, and you speak football, you can play football with anyone. It's magnificent. I've seen it in Brazil, I've seen it in Jordan, I've seen it in Turkey. It's an international language. Now, for hockey in this country, the spectrum and the systems, again, are very white, male-dominated. And that's a problem, because there's spaces that are not. There's no entry level for our boys. Now, in many communities, boys love hockey. They grew up loving the Maple Leafs. Nazem Kadri was a really, really big deal in this community and came to our events, and the boys saw themselves represented. So representation.
It's not just boys, right? It's girls love watching and playing hockey as well.
Unfortunately, we do not have a women's professional league in this country anymore, which is a huge failure of the country and the systems again. But yeah, girls love sports too. I mean, I grew up watching men play hockey majority, and I loved it. My mom did. So I think
my mom did too. She used to shout at the TV. Go.
My mother still does. So I think that that's really important. Now, in terms of the actual culture, there's a lot of things. The cultures of racism, and when we look back at the histories of culture, hockey culture in Canada, you're looking at the all-black leagues in Nova Scotia. You look at Indigenous groups. Up north now, they have, in Northern Ontario, they have Indigenous girls hockey teams. This was not supposed to be purely for white dudes. And that's what became of hockey in Canada over a period of time. And I think there's this really beautiful movie called Soul on Ice by Damon Mason, who's a filmmaker. And you should all watch that to look at the history. There's movements within the NHL to create diversity spaces. A very good friend of mine, Dr. Courtney Cito at Queen's University, and 3 other authors just created a policy paper for the NHL and for hockey on what to do. My advice to parents and to communities, keep taking your kids out there. There's a lot of, not even low-key, there's a lot of very overt racism that you hear, but it's not okay. It's not acceptable. If you have the strength, inshallah, to call it out, challenge it. It's unacceptable, and now because of social media, I've seen things in the last year in hockey that I didn't think would happen in my lifetime, including the firing of a very xenophobic, racist, sexist man. And this is very important. I didn't think it would happen in my lifetime, and I didn't think the op-ed that I wrote for the Globe and Mail would have anything to do with it, but subhanAllah, you never know.
Do you want to add something to that, Bilqis?
So it's been a very different experience for me in Canada versus America. And I say that because right now I'm coaching an all-Muslim girls team in a Catholic league. And our first game, just recently, we scored 50 points to another team's 5. Wow. And mashallah, our girls are very good. The next day or the next 2 days, I get an email from the league saying we're too brutal. And whenever we walk into gyms, we're getting stared at. All of our girls wear hijab. And it's interesting just here in Canada because it's very diverse here. You know, it's very different than America as far as Muslims in the community.
In the big cities, yes.
Yeah, they're very, very large. In London as well, though. That's where I reside. But it just angered me because now I have to tell my girls, calm down, because people don't like us. And it's unfortunate, but I used, you know, and for me as a coach, I use that as, you know, just energy and as fuel to keep them going. That people, we do have a target on our backs, regardless, you know, so it made them play a little harder. But it's unfortunate that, you know, my girls are being told to calm down, you know, to not score as many points. But if it was vice versa, would I have received an email? Mm-hmm. You know, so we have to be mindful. And again, if people did see more Muslim girls in these spaces, then that email probably wouldn't be sent, you know?
Thank you very much, Shireen and Bilqis. It was a wonderful conversation. I wish we could continue it further, but there's much more to the program to come. Thank you. Shireen, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add this after Bilqis was speaking, and I know I mentioned this too, about the criticism that come within the communities, often men that don't like the sisters moving and being active. Brothers, if you're not interested and you're bothered by it, don't look.
That's it.
Thank you very much for that last comment, Shireen.